This is everything that's right about baseball. Field of Dreams here in Columbia, Illinois.
We're trying to look at reading as something that's vital for the nation's health.
They are an incredible example of what it means to be American.
Today on Spotlight, a COVID saliva test developed by WashU. Plus, a popular fictional detective and the author who created her. And then, after a 6-month hiatus, a local art gallery reopens. But first, a real-life Field of Dreams. It's Sunday, and you're watching Spotlight.
It's an unexpected sight in southern Illinois. In the middle of a family farm, right between the cornfields, is a piece of baseball heaven. It all came about thanks to a love for the game and the love of family.
My father and my mom both went together on this baseball field and built it for us. We needed a place to play on. My brother is a bit older than I am, so we were looking for places to play and couldn't find enough spots, so my dad decided, well, I think we could just put a spot right here in the middle of the cornfield.
It was his dream to build this place because my dad loved the game of baseball as a kid, but was actually denied some of the opportunity because of his life and his family. And my grandpa was a German farmer, and he was okay with sports, but when it was time to work, it was time to work. So my dad still instilled hard work into me in my life, but he always made it known that we will play ball. Hey, hang your bag up.
This way we could always practice anytime we wanted to, whether if it was 7 o'clock at night on a Tuesday or if it was 9 a.m. on a Saturday. And that really opened the door for a lot of not only our families, but also the guys local in town and other competing towns too to play baseball games out here.
And one name stuck from the beginning. The ball club that gets to call this field home was and still is the Saints.
If you go back and think about how long the Saints baseball team has been around, it's been since the 90s. Every year it had evolved between AABC ball, Babe Ruth, Southwestern Illinois baseball, Junior Legion, Senior Legion, and then lastly was Montclair baseball, which is a men's league here in the area. But now we go back to the younger generation starting all over again. Compared to every sport out there, I think there's no other feeling like baseball when you strike someone out or when you hit that perfect pitch and you hit it in the gap and you run around the bases. The crack of the bat, throwing a guy out from right field, it really is the tops of any other sport. My brother and I both played our entire lives. I saw it as always a good escape from whatever's going on in the world.
Baseball to me is teamwork. You're depending on a group of people. Teamwork, problem solving, just how mentally tough you can be, how physically tough you can be, which is important life skills.
Some of the same qualities needed when life takes an unexpected turn, as it did in 2008.
So my dad was sick, diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He did his treatments, and the outcome was expected. And he was a fighter, and he told me, he says, that's it, that's enough. But it was also good that we could get everything out. So he told me, he says, and I don't ever want to leave the farm, that he would like to be buried on the farm, and more specifically in left field, outside the fence. That was his wish, and that's what he wanted. We were able to do a lot of talking, and what he told me was, keep playing baseball out here, keep playing baseball. So what we have going now with an 8-year-old team, a 9U and 11U, we're playing baseball. I can't coach all 3 teams, but I like to be around. Take that step and throw it at him. Right? They have good group of coaches, and that's what these kids need.
This is everything that's right about baseball. You know, what Doc and Michelle do out here, it's a Field of Dreams here in Columbia, Illinois. It gives the kids a great opportunity to have a chance to play, and it's in such a neat atmosphere.
I like to come here because I know my friends are here, and like this is just a team with all my friends and just fun practicing. I like it here because it's the best place to play ball.
It's a good way for the legacy of the Saints to live on. The teams can evolve. Since it's not necessarily a baseball team, it could also be a softball team. I have the same guys I played with growing up. I know some of them have daughters, and who knows, I could have one too. So it could be a softball team one day as well.
What means the most to me is the development of ball players, to see where they can grow to, how they can grow, how they can start their lives and their baseball career. And if I can be a small part of it, I'm all for it. I'm going to take the same stance my dad did with my boys. The work will be there when we get home. We'll get it done, and we're going to always make time for baseball.
Follow HEC Media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Nasal swabs for COVID-19 testing may be uncomfortable, and some people may try to avoid them. So researchers began looking for other ways. Knowing the virus can be detected in saliva, Rich Head's team at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis got to work.
Ourselves and a number of other labs, I think, started embarking down this path of could we make saliva work as a reliable clinical grade test?
His lab succeeded. The professor of genetics and pathology and immunology is the director of the Genome Technology Access Center. The center is already processing saliva tests.
Taken over into the robotics room for processing.
Head is leading this latest development. His center began assembling 10,000 saliva collection kits per week for the people in the state of Missouri.
Our focus will be on the institution, the St. Louis region, and Missouri.
The ability is now growing to assembling 50,000 collection kits per week with the help of a local company.
We ask people to pool and drool, basically pull the saliva in their mouth and drool it through the funnel, which is very easy to collect.
One of the keys to his success involves equipment in his lab from the biotechnology company Fluidigm.
It runs on their platform. They also have a hardware system called the Fluidigm Biomark, which is basically a PCR instrument.
Head says PCR, or polymerase chain reaction, is the gold standard for testing because it's highly sensitive and specific to detecting even tiny levels of the virus in a saliva sample.
So that's what PCR does, is it takes that input genomic template of the virus, amplifies it up in a very specific way, just amplifying that virus without maybe any other virus that might be there or other sequence that might be there, and then allows you to tell how much of that was present in the sample.
Developing the saliva test for detecting the SARS-CoV-2 virus took a few tries, but their science with the Fluidigm technology made for highly sensitive, accurate, and fast virus detection.
Was able to detect even just a handful of copies of the virus in a sample.
At this time, about 300 labs in the world, and growing, have the Fluidigm equipment. Because the equipment is here, people tested in Missouri are among the first to benefit. The lab is running hundreds of samples per hour and is growing to process 35,000 samples a week by the end of October. Saliva testing in Missouri should speed up COVID-19 testing, as this test does not require special swabs and reagents that have been in short supply. Self-collection kits can lead to home collection services. And at testing locations, there are benefits for healthcare workers.
So you don't have to expose the healthcare workers directly. They can be sitting a good distance away and just observing that the individual is depositing the saliva into the tube.
It's like in music, you got different instruments. They got to play a symphony. So even these that we take from nature, they have to play the symphony of this mural.
The mural was first created shortly before Henry Shaw opened the museum and indeed the whole Missouri Botanical Garden to the public. And over the years that deteriorated, bits fell down at various times during its history.
It has to be close to the original because it's a historic recreation. It's an homage of some sort to something that was really beautiful and very well done.
In this case, it's not that easy to be precise because we've got fragments of it. 60% of it was destroyed over the past 150 years from water damage, and it was overpainted several times.
The original, I love it, but we're gonna do better.
Part of the excitement of this restoration of the building is we are able to go back to peel off the layers of paint and do a faithful replica of what had been there in 1859.
What do you feel when you're attached to somebody, attached to a woman? It's a tremendous feeling. It's the same thing. This is my woman. Really.
This the deceased vehicle?
It is. I could see you in one of those.
Wouldn't drive that if you paid me.
She's the detective who broke the crime series mold. Unlike most other female detectives, Vera is unglamorous and uncompromising, known for her no-nonsense wit and sarcastic put-downs.
That's comforting to know that you've got a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to one of your officers being assaulted.
Don't give over, he barely touched you.
Laura Whitelock, the hospital say that you can talk to her whenever you want. You know, it's fine for you to say it's nothing, but what about next time?
Next time, learn to talk.
Fans worldwide love her. The show, now preparing for its 11th season, has an average of 7.5 million viewers per episode. And Vera was recently voted one of Britain's top 5 favorite TV detectives of all time. Hard to believe she was never really planned to be the protagonist of a popular book series turned crime drama. Like her presence on the show, Vera marched right into her creator's book, The Crow Trap, completely unannounced.
I had somebody come in and it was just miraculous because it was Vera Stanhope and I had the name and I described her as looking more like a bag lady than a detective.
8 books later, Vera is still surprising author Ann Cleeves.
I need to write the next chapter to find out what's happening. Well, I think Vera and I find out who the killer is at about the same time, so I don't know in advance.
And that's the way Cleeves likes it. For 20 years, she entertained mostly herself by writing books. She didn't have a lot of fans. That changed when Vera hit the television screens.
The grandchildren, they quite like having a famous granny. Occasionally, a reader will come up and say, "Oh, you're Ann Cleeves." And if one of the kids are with me, they quite like it.
They're beaming with pride too.
Or the teenagers looking really embarrassed and slinking off, pretending they're not with me.
We talk with the Bird Observatory cook turned probation officer turned queen of Village Noir about her latest book, The Darkest Evening, and the importance of its setting in a part of northeastern England called the Northumberland.
I love the idea of that brooding forest that's surrounding the big house, but also surrounding the farms too, and that plays a big part in the story.
Absolutely. It makes sense. For those who have read it, you'll say, oh yeah, I understand then why you said it there.
So when did the trauma happen?
Up to 5 hours before he died. He was a dead man walking as soon as he received the head injury.
So between 7 p.m. and 1 a.m.?
Yeah.
Well, I presume he wasn't standing there for 5 hours where we found him waiting to die. So the crime scene was somewhere else.
She believes telling stories is hardwired, not only in her, but in all of us.
You get kids, they're pretending to be somebody else in the playground. And I think that's what we all do. Or we tell jokes, but it's all stories, really.
And how the stories in books can help our health, particularly in stressful times. She's even set up reading and writing groups in some unlikely places and is now funding a program to prescribe reading to patients.
We're trying to look at reading as something that's vital to the nation's health, not just emotionally and psychologically, but actually financially and economically. And so getting people reading if they're not feeling well, I just was interested in seeing whether it would work or not. So GPs, doctors who will prescribe member of a reading group or meeting with a reading coach for mild anxiety, mild depression, chronic pain, because I think that it will work. And even better, we have 2 universities who have got a big research fund grant to research the project for a year. So we're doing a pilot year and we'll see how it goes.
What else? Are you working on a novel right now?
I'm just coming to the end of the first draft of a new Matthew Vane, yes. So that should come out this time next year.
Well, we are excited to see it. That'll be the second in the Two Rivers series, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Ann, I have so enjoyed this conversation and learning more about you and your wonderful books. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you. And carry on doing all the great work that you are doing too.
Text Cleeves to 31996 to watch the full interview or download our Talking with Authors podcast. A powerful conversation about race later on Spotlight.
Go to hecmedia.org for the arts and authors.
Completely accidental because I never set out to write a book.
Science and history, culture and community.
It's considered to be the oldest organic farm west of the Mississippi.
Education, films.
Finding the coin places the site firmly in the 13th century.
What's happening now around St. Louis and more. See for yourself at hecmedia.org.
Art, whatever form it takes, is about the mystery of life.
I hope that people feel sort of compelled to investigate the piece. It's very odd, it's alien, it's strange.
There is an image that you get 10, 15 feet away, but as you get closer, you start to realize there's a whole other painting going on, there's a whole other drawing going on.
It has to do with a pandemic and an epidemic. The pandemic being COVID-19, of course, and the epidemic of black people being mishandled, murdered, etc. by the police.
After 6 months of challenging time, reopening the gallery was very important to me, obviously, and to many artists that I've been working with for so many years. My 15th season in St. Louis, showing solo shows by Michael Barron, Patricia Olenek, Chris Keller, and William Morris.
I'm interested in using ephemera and visual material that is probably going to go away. Well, the exhibition spans the work of the last 2.5 years. I do a lot of work on the road when I'm traveling. In the early 80s, I developed this strategy of installation that I called static theater. They involved a two-dimensional element on a wall and then sculpture in front of it. That is part of the content and part of the material and part of the narrative. There's a lot of material in my work that's political or social, and then there's areas of it where it's very personal.
Oculus is a light sculpture that is inspired by the strange sort of science fiction that began to emerge from the era of the 60s. When I was at the University of Michigan teaching, I was working in a transgenics lab, and one of the life forms that I was working with quite a bit were these Drosophila flies, which is one of the key species that scientists work with to play with genetic code and with DNA. Looking at the faceted fly eye of the transgenic Drosophila, which is just a fruit fly, I began to see some deformations or reformations of the eye and decided to build a light sculpture that focused on this notion of both being viewed and viewing simultaneously. I hope that the work invites a kind of closer observation of the world around us.
Shift was a show that I've been working on for about 2 years. I'm always working in a very intense manner in the 2 to 3 months before a show. This show was scheduled to be in April, and when we got interrupted, the work did take a shift. I figured out a way for me to create something extremely beautiful, then destroy it, and then build it back up. It's very much In relation to some of the feelings that maybe a lot of people are having during this time, it does mark a difference for me. Drawing became so much more important in the development of each of these works. I started the show and everything was about really high saturation, strong color, very aggressive. And then as I developed over time, I started to get a little more subdued and a little more quiet. The really spectacular things that can occur, those little happy accidents, those things occur over time and they develop in a more subtle way. And I think that really comes across in the work.
The piece has a lot to do with ratings and coverage, and which of those two is more important. It's about media and media's coverage of the pandemic and George Floyd's murder by the police. CNN, NBC, the footage of the actual events from YouTube are in there, and the primary piece that holds the whole thing together is this track from Brass Against called Wake Up. There's a little snippet of Peter Finch in Network where he says, "I am announcing my retirement due to poor ratings." Dissect the information you receive from television carefully, because a big component of electronic journalism is entertainment, and another component is ratings, and then there's the news.
Happening now at the Bruno David Gallery through October 24th. You can find the stories featured in today's show along with past episodes and more at hecmedia.org/spotlight.
I met my first African Americans when I was 11 years old. When I met them, I felt fear.
They never told me I was brown or any other color or that I was any different from anybody else. My grandmothers were biracial. My grandmother was always telling me, just remember, God created all colors.
On a winter afternoon in Hermann, Missouri, a group of people gathered to share stories. Black people and white people sharing their memories of growing up in small Missouri towns in a time of strict segregation. In some cases, the segregation continued even after civil rights laws were enacted. The discussion was honest and candid, and no one shied away from difficult topics.
I was the first Black person to walk through the Davison's Cafe and order me a cheeseburger and fries and not have to go in the back. In Montgomery City, if you want to go to the show, you had to go upstairs and sit.
Going upstairs, it was automatic, you know what I'm saying? So we didn't think, well, we'd rather sit downstairs. When I got to St. Louis, things like that would not have been tolerated. But that's all we knew, and just a handful of us, we wasn't going to raise any cane.
I grew up in an entirely segregated atmosphere.
Even those who came only to listen found themselves ready to share.
I did not see an African American until I was 7 or 8 years old, and I went to Brownie Day Camp, and I made friends with a little girl. I said, "Mother, I have a new friend. I made a new friend. Can she come over and play with me?" And my mother said, the upshot of it was, no, I couldn't invite my friend over to play with me.
But to say I'm going to be committed to this?
This powerful discussion didn't happen by chance. Cecilia Nadal extended an open invitation to African Americans and to whites of German heritage to share their experiences. She is a sociologist and playwright who is passionate about cross-cultural engagement. She became fascinated with a little-known slice of Missouri history. German immigrants who settled in Missouri were staunch abolitionists. The small town of Hermann, Missouri became ground zero for an anti-slavery movement.
These people came speaking German, never being in America before, having to find a place in the Wild West to live, where they're going to work, build houses,
whatever they look like. Their challenges of acclimating to a new country were huge then. And yet, when it came to what position they would have on slavery, this group, particularly in Missouri, really had very firm notions about what democracy should look like. And whether they knew a black person or not, or a slave, we're just not going to come to a country and let that be, because we've come from a place that had terrible oppression. So we would be hypocrites if we did not stand up for what democracy should be.
The story inspired Cecilia to write a play that was performed in Herman and in St. Louis.
Where would they go?
Called An Amazing Story, the drama portrays how German immigrants fought against slavery.
We are all Americans now, and the ideal of democracy belongs to all the many people of this great land.
One key figure in the history is Arnold Krickle. He was a federal judge who ran an anti-slavery newspaper. In 1854, he spearheaded the formation of Lincoln University in Jefferson City, the nation's first degree-granting historically black college. He also represented freedmen in disputes with employers. It was up to Cecilia as the playwright to imagine the conversations these real characters might have had.
The way I see it, we are all American. This is the only country I've ever known.
The play was the icebreaker, if you will, and only the beginning. Conversations like this continued the dialogue.
You know, Dad was the first tavern owner to ever serve a black man at the bar. He took a lot of static over that, and he lost some customers.
My family moved here in 1908. My family employed a lot of African American people. Henry Ellis worked for us on one of our farms across the river, and great family.
Since the discussion, Herman held its first ever Black History Month celebration. Building bridges and having face-to-face conversations, however difficult, are paths to healing and understanding, according to Cecilia.
The German immigrant abolitionist story was one that was extremely important for where we are today in America. Why? Because these were people who did not know the people they were fighting for, but on principle, they said, we're going to do something about it. They are an incredible example of what it means to be American, and that is to stand up for what we believe in.
Next week, a group bringing new businesses to St. Louis. Find out how. Plus, a virtual concert created to teach people to coexist. Thanks for watching Spotlight. Join us next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.